Would you believe it if I told you that a dog single-handedly faced an enraged bull to protect his family, and that the impossible happened in front of everyone's eyes? Sounds like a movie scene, doesn't it? But believe me, this story happened for real, and she has everything to mess with you. Because we are not just talking about courage, we are talking about instinct, loyalty, and a love so intense that it defies any logic. Have you ever imagined being faced with a situation in which everything indicated tragedy, and suddenly an unlikely hero appears, with 4 legs and a heart bigger than any obstacle? This is exactly what you will follow now. Stories of dogs saving lives always make us reflect on the strength of the bond between humans and animals. But when we hear something like this, the mind insists on asking, would I have believed it if I were there? Would my eyes accept witnessing a dog defying death to protect his family? These questions are not just rhetorical, they have the power to open up within us a new insight into what courage means. And I want you to stay with me until the end, because what you will discover now may surprise you. Imagine the scenario, the noise of the field, the tension in the air, a raging bull about to advance without measuring consequences. All around, people in shock, not knowing how to act, not imagining that someone, or rather some being, would have the courage to put themselves in the middle of that storm of fury. And it is at that moment, when all seems lost, that an ordinary dog, of those who could be running after a ball or sleeping on the couch, decides to take on the role of guardian. Have you ever been through this, of witnessing something so strong that it seems almost unbelievable? The most striking thing about these stories is not only the act itself, but what they reveal about nature. Dogs do not calculate risks like we do not make strategic plans, do not weigh losses and gains. They act out of pure instinct for love and protection. And that is precisely where the power of these narratives lies. They show us that sometimes the impossible only happens when there is no time to think, only to act. Have you noticed how these moments can change the way we see the world? And do not think that this is an isolated case. Over time, thousands of reports have emerged of dogs who, without hesitation, threw themselves into extreme situations to save human lives. But this one in particular has a detail that makes it even more striking. It was not just an act of courage, it was a challenge to what everyone considered inevitable. After all, who in their right mind would believe that a much smaller animal would stand any chance in the face of the brutality of an enraged bull? It is at this point that the story begins to take on the contours of legend, because it mixes the real with the unbelievable. The dog not only coped but surprised all those present with his determination. It is as if at that moment he understood that there was no alternative. Either he faced danger or his family would be destroyed, and that certainty is what makes the episode so exciting. Now, take a deep breath and get ready, because with each detail revealed, the scene becomes even more alive in your imagination. You will feel the suspense, the adrenaline, and above all the emotion that took hold of those who witnessed this heroic act. And this is where the true journey of this narrative begins. A journey that's not just about a dog and a bull, but about the limits of the impossible and the strength of a bond that defies explanation. Stay with me, because what comes next will take you even deeper into this story that seems like something out of an epic tale, but that happened in front of incredulous human eyes, and that's where it all starts to get even more surprising. And as that scene begins to form with clarity in your mind, almost as if you're there following every second, it's impossible not to think about how certain stories touch us in a unique way. Perhaps because they awaken memories, perhaps because they show a courage that we often do not even imagine exists. And that's why I want to open a special space here. If this subject makes sense to you, leave here in the comments what has touched you the most so far. It could be a memory with your dog, a situation where you felt that same protective force, or simply the thrill of hearing something like that. Your experience also enriches this conversation, and believe me, every comment creates a real connection between everyone who is here. And since we are on this journey together, take the opportunity to enjoy this video. This simple gesture makes all the difference so that stories like this reach even more people, touching hearts that perhaps today need exactly this dose of inspiration. And of course, if you are not yet part of this community, subscribe to the channel. It shows that you want to continue walking with me, discovering more amazing and exciting stories that prove day after day the strength of this incredible bond between humans and dogs. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about watching a video, It's about creating an undercurrent of emotion, empathy, and learning. And your participation here is what makes this channel grow and bring this message to more and more people. So comment, like, subscribe, and stay with me, because what comes next will still surprise you much more. That morning, everything seemed too ordinary. The sun illuminated the small farm in the interior of the United States with a warm and soft light, those that give the feeling of peace. Children ran around the yard. The sound of laughter filled the air, while parents took care of everyday chores. It was a simple scene, but loaded with that kind of tranquility that we only find in places where life still runs at its own pace. Those who looked from the outside might say that this was just another day, without great events, without anything that could mark the memory. But it is precisely behind the scenes of routine that, often, the hidden truth of life is revealed, transforming ordinary moments into unforgettable journeys. The family dog was there too, attentive to her every move, watching as if she knew her role went far beyond just being a companion. Some say that animals sense things that we humans don't. A change in the air, a subtle detail, an invisible impact about to happen. And in that lull scene, there was something in the environment that seemed to herald a break, as if a deep silence was guarding an unexpected revelation. While the father took care of the fence, checking that everything was tight, the mother collected some objects near the barn. The smell of hay mixed with that of damp earth brought a welcoming feeling. Children played near the orchard, vying who climbed the fastest on the trunk of a tree. It was a living photograph of a simple life, but full of meaning. However, it is precisely in these peaceful scenarios that the trials that test our mentality, our decisions, and even our ability to cope with the unexpected often arise. Suddenly, something broke this tranquility. The distant sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the field, breaking the harmony of the scene. It was not any noise, it was the dry, steady sound of a bull that had strayed from the neighboring corral. That huge animal, with an almost enormous strength, carried in its eyes an uncontrollable fury, and there was no fence to stop him. The impact of that moment was like an invisible wave that swept through the entire farm in seconds. The children stopped playing. The father put down the tools. The mother held her breath. Time seemed to slow down. In these hours, we realize how a decision made in seconds can change everything. There was no time to think about elaborate strategies. The protective instinct took over every person there, but along with it came the paralyzing fear of not knowing what to do in the face of such brute force. It is in this kind of situation that life reveals a powerful truth. Often the hero is not the one who has calculated all the possibilities, but the one who, moved by love and courage, acts when no one else can. The family dog, who until then had only been watching, entered the scene with a determination that no one expected. There was no hesitation in his eyes. For him, there was no moral dilemma, no room for doubt or calculation. It was a journey of pure instinct, an immediate response to the danger that threatened its owners. And here is an important revelation. While we humans fight internal battles between fear and courage, between logic and emotion, animals teach that often the true answer lies in following what moves us in the depths of the soul. The bull advanced with a fury that seemed unstoppable. The ground shook with every step, and the feeling was that nothing could stop him. But in that instant, something extraordinary happened. The dog did not retreat. On the contrary, it rushed towards danger. And it is impossible not to be impressed by the impact of this scene. A small animal facing a colossal force, choosing to face the impossible. This moment carries deep symbolism, about courage, about unconditional love, and about how certain attitudes, even the most unlikely ones, have the power to transform the course of a story. Now I want to go even deeper into this matter, because what happened next wasn't just an act of bravery. It was a true lesson about transformation and about the strength that exists within each of us when we are put to the test. Think about it. How many times in life have we come across situations when everything seemed lost, when there was no visible way out, and even then one unexpected attitude completely changed the result? It is as if there is a hidden spark within us, ready to ignite when danger or difficulty corners us. This scene on the farm isn't just about a bull and a dog. It's about mentality, about how decisions made in moments have the power to write entire destinies. And it's about the revelation that true strength is not in size or logic or reason, but in the intensity of what moves us. Behind the scenes of this story, there is a quiet but powerful message. Courage is born of love, and when love is strong enough, it is able to weather any storm. What makes this episode even more fascinating is that it makes us reflect on our own choices. How often do we stop acting out of fear? How many opportunities for transformation do we miss because we prefer to retreat rather than take a step forward? This dog shows us that sometimes the impossible only becomes reality because someone, even without being aware of it, has decided not to give up. And it invites us to look inside and ask, what would I do if I were there? This journey of reflection is essential, not only to understand the act of courage itself, but to see the impact it can have on how we live our own lives. Every detail of this scene brings revelations about the essence of courage, about how seemingly small decisions can generate gigantic changes. And when we think about it, we realize that life is made up of moments like this, simple, but capable of turning our story upside down. And you, how do you feel when you imagine this scene happening before your eyes? Write in the comments, "This makes sense to me." The heavy silence that had engulfed the farm lasted only a few seconds, because soon the sound of hooves against the earth echoed like thunder, announcing that something out of the ordinary was about to happen. The bull advanced toward the yard, snorting, nostrils open in a heavy breath, each snap of the hooves against the ground raising small clouds of dust. It was as if the tranquility of that day had been torn at once, and now everyone found themselves faced with a real, palpable threat that gave no room for hesitation. The size of the animal was impressive, but what was most striking was the look. A look charged with fury, wild instinct, and lack of control. Anyone who has witnessed it closely knows the presence of a bull in this state has an immediate impact on the human body, because it awakens both fear and the urgent need to react. The children, once full of energy, froze as if time had stopped. The father, who was closest to the gate, had that reflex of opening his arms trying to look bigger, in an instinctive attempt to ward off danger. The mother, in turn, took a few steps towards her children, her heart racing and her mind looking for a way out. But any movement seemed small in the face of the brute force coming towards him. That's the hidden truth about moments of danger. As much as we plan, nothing really prepares us for the intensity of coming face to face with something that can change the whole story in seconds. The bull pounded its hooves into the ground, digging the earth as if ready to invest. The air filled with tension, as if all the sounds of nature, the birds, the wind, even the laughter of the children moments ago, had been silenced to make room only for the noise of that animal. And what makes this scenario so impressive is realizing that, faced with situations like this, we are forced to confront our own limitations. What to do when there is nowhere to run? What decision do you make when you don't have time to think? These are the crossroads that reveal a lot about our mentality, because it is precisely in these hours that the essence of the human being comes to the fore. But there was someone there who did not need complicated reflections to act. The family dog, until then only attentive, now advanced a few steps, its body tense, its hair bristling. He did not calculate risks, did not analyze strategies. Instinct spoke louder. The scene was almost cinematic. On one side, a huge bull, symbol of strength and brutality. On the other, a much smaller dog, but with a determination that seemed unshakable. The contrast between sizes only made the moment even more dramatic. It was the very image of unequal struggle, of courage in the face of the impossible. This moment carries a powerful symbolism. How many times in life are we put in front of invisible bulls, problems, crises, difficult decisions that seem uncontrollable? And how often do we feel too small to cope? This is where this story stops being just about a farm in the United States and turns into a metaphor for our personal journey. The impact that this animal has brought to that family goes beyond the immediate risk. He opened up how definitive every choice, every reaction can be. Meanwhile, the bull's breathing grew stronger, hot steam coming out of his nostrils like smoke on a cold day. He snorted and dragged his hooves, and at any moment the attack could happen. The danger was imminent, and everyone present felt the weight of this suspense. It is curious how, in these moments, seconds seem to turn into minutes, as if time extends only to make us feel the gravity of the situation. It was as if reality itself was in slow motion, forcing every detail to be recorded. The sound of the earth being torn apart by hooves, the glint of the animal's eyes, the smell of dust beginning to rise. And this is where we realize how life often catches us off guard. No matter how much we think we are in control, there are external forces, unforeseen events, and events that run through our routine and force us to face difficult truths. This is the frame of existence. No one expects a bull to invade a family's yard on an ordinary day, just as no one expects life to bring storms when everything seems calm. But they come. And it is in this clash between the unexpected and the need to act that great revelations are hidden. The dog advanced a few more steps, without looking away, as if he were fully aware that his journey would be to face that danger. There was no room for escape or doubt. This instinctive decision of the animal shows a silent transformation, from a simple companion of the family to a guardian. It's a powerful revelation because it reminds us that often courage isn't born in planned moments, but in the heat of impact, when the only choice is to face up. Now I want to go even deeper into this matter, because the scene that was drawn there is not only about physical risk. It carries universal lessons about mindset, about how quick decisions shape destinies, and about the strength that can exist in even the most unlikely of presences. Every detail of this encounter between the bull and the dog goes beyond what the eyes see. It is about instinct, about love, about what we cannot explain but that we feel in the innermost part of the soul. It is the hidden truth that even in the face of the impossible, there is always a chance of victory when courage decides to speak up. And when imagining all this, I want to invite you to leave a single phrase in the comments that translates this feeling. I'm on this journey too. Despair took hold of every movement. The bull, even more agitated, snorted loudly and dragged its hooves against the ground as if sharpening its own fury. It was impossible not to feel the vibration of that whole weight echoing through the yard, as if the earth itself trembled before the approaching threat. The father tried to run towards the children, his heart beating out of whack, but immediately realized that there would not be enough time. The distance between the animal and the little ones was too short, and the speed with which the threat advanced made it clear that any attempt at protection would be belated. It was at that moment that the feeling of panic took shape, a suffocating mixture of fear and helplessness that only those who have lived through a moment of imminent danger can understand. The mother, in an almost instinctive reflex, stretched out her arms as if she could protect her children only with the strength of her own body. Her face betrayed the internal struggle between courage and despair, as if every fiber was trying to decide between running or facing. The children, paralyzed, did not know whether to run, scream, or simply close their eyes waiting for the inevitable impact. This is the kind of scene that reminds us how life can turn in a matter of seconds. An ordinary day full of laughter and simple routines can turn into a real battlefield, where quick decisions determine the course of history. And it is curious how in these extreme situations the revelation of human vulnerability arises. All the control we believe we have over life falls apart in the face of something bigger, uncontrollable, that does not respond to logic or planning. That backyard, once the scene of innocent pranks, was now the center of a silent battle between the instinct of survival and the threat of tragedy. It's impossible not to think about how moments like these have the power to deeply scar a family, creating scars that remain even after the danger is gone. The panic was not only of the body, but of the mind. The feeling was that time multiplied. Each second stretched into endless fragments of fear and expectation. The father knew that any rash movement could provoke the immediate attack of the bull. The mother, on the other hand, fought the impulse to run, because she knew that this would put her children even more at risk. This is the hidden truth of decisions under pressure. Sometimes there is no perfect choice, only the desperate attempt to avoid the worst. The children looked around, trying to understand the gravity of the moment. The elder shook the younger brother's hand, as if that simple gesture was enough to convey some security. But the truth is that they were defenseless, exposed, and everyone there knew it. The emotional impact of that moment was devastating, because every look exchanged carried a silent question: will we survive? This doubt hung in the air like an invisible sentence, difficult to shake off. In the midst of all this confusion, the family dog remained steadfast. He did not hesitate, did not show fear. On the contrary, he was moving more and more towards danger, as if fully aware that there was no other way out. This journey of courage seemed to contradict all logic, but at the same time, it was the only possible response in the face of chaos. The contrast between human despair and animal determination was like a revelation about the very nature of protection and unconditional love. This moment is a clear portrait of how emotions can take full control of the situation. Panic generates paralysis, but it also provokes instincts that are normally hidden. It is as if, behind the scenes of the mind, there is a silent battle between reason and emotion, between fear and action. And the most fascinating thing is that in the midst of all this, courage can arise from the most unexpected place. The dog did not seem to measure strength, but to fulfill a silent destiny, as if born for that moment. The children, still motionless, watched with wide eyes. The youngest cried softly, the sound muffled by the tension in the air. The father felt a dry throat, unable to scream, and the mother only repeated to herself that she needed to protect her children at any cost. The whole environment seemed to transform. The wind that once swayed the trees now sounded like a wail. The birds had disappeared, and even the sunlight seemed harsher, as if reflecting the gravity of the scene. That was the real impact of the threat, not just physical but psychological, altering the perception of everyone who was there. And there is something even deeper to reflect on. How many times in life do we face invisible bulls that invade our peace and force us to deal with situations for which we are not prepared? Financial crises, unexpected illnesses, painful decisions, sudden losses. Each of us at some point finds himself facing something bigger, stronger, and more aggressive than he imagined enduring. And, like this family, we are left vulnerable, exposed, with no time to prepare elaborate defenses. It is in this shock that the greatest revelations about who we really are born. The dog did not think about it, but his attitude revealed exactly this hidden truth, that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act in spite of it. Love became his only weapon, and this was more powerful than any physical force. While the family was caught between hesitation and despair, the dog moved forward, turning that backyard into a stage of definitive decisions. Now I want to go even deeper into this matter, because what was about to happen was not just a physical confrontation between one animal and another, but a real proof of transformation. It was the kind of situation where the mentality of everyone present would be tested to the limit, and the revelations that would emerge from there would not be restricted to just that moment of danger. They would echo as learning, as lasting impact on the way of seeing life, family, and courage. This scene invites us to reflect on something bigger. How often do we find ourselves in situations where there seems to be no way out, where panic dominates and we feel that tragedy is inevitable? Despair can even try to paralyze us, but it is precisely in these moments that courage, coming from where it is least expected, can change everything. It is as if fate rearranges itself in seconds, guided by decisions that no one has had time to plan. And you, imagining this moment of tension, what do you feel? If you were there, in the place of this family, how would you react? He said, "That makes sense to me." The yard seemed to have been swallowed by the heavy silence that precedes a tragedy. The bull advanced slowly, like a storm about to burst, snorting with intensity, dragging its hooves and scattering earth with every movement. The family was paralyzed, trapped by fear and the feeling that there was no possible escape. It was as if reality had turned into a vivid nightmare, one of those moments when every second drags on into a harrowing eternity. It was then that everyone's attention turned to him, the family dog. It wasn't just a pet, it was a companion for years, present at every stage of that family journey, a silent witness to laughter, tears, and simple country life. And at that moment, he was not just another observer, he was the protagonist who emerged. The dog's attentive eyes shone with a mixture of determination and instinct. He realized, before any human, the size of the threat. While everyone retreated, overcome by insecurity and dread, he advanced. The hairs on its back shuddered, the body protruded forward in an attacking position, and a low growl cut through the silence, reverberating like a warning. It was the first line of defense between the family and the approaching beast. The scene was almost symbolic. On the one hand, human frailty in the face of brute force. On the other, the unexpected courage of a being who, without measuring consequences, decided to face the impossible. The father still tried to find a strategy. The mother held the children tightly, but both knew deep down that nothing could be done. They were at the mercy of luck, or maybe fate. And it was exactly at this point that the dog took upon himself the responsibility that no one dared to carry. It was as if he had quietly understood that protecting that family was his greatest mission. This hidden truth about animals is something that touches us deeply. They don't hesitate, they don't calculate, they don't question whether it's worth it. They just love it. And love in this case took the form of bravery. The bull snorted, furiously digging the earth, but found ahead an opponent who did not retreat. The dog barked loudly, each sound echoing like a cry of resistance. It was impossible not to shudder at the scene. It was not about physical strength, but about mentality, about decision, about a sudden transformation that turned an ordinary dog into an absolute guardian. Behind the scenes of that unequal struggle was a powerful symbolism. Courage is not born from the absence of fear, but from the decision not to allow fear to win. As the family watched in shock, the dog placed itself exactly between them and danger. His movements were calculated not by reason, but by the instinct of protection. He advanced a few steps, retreated, studied the bull with almost human attention. It was as if his mind was seized by a single revelation. If it were not for him, no one else could stop the tragedy. And that truth made the scene all the more exciting, because it revealed that greatness can come from the most unexpected places. The tension grew. The bull pounded its hooves hard, raising clouds of dust that scattered across the yard. His every step seemed a harbinger of destruction. But in the face of all that brutality, there was a medium-sized dog, without weapons, without guarantees, only with the courage that was born of the unbreakable bond with his family. That was the revelation that many do not understand. The impact of a determined heart can be greater than the violence of any outside force. And here is something essential for us to reflect. How many times in our journey have we faced situations where all seems lost, where there is no chance of victory? Often the natural thing is to retreat, wait for someone to solve it for us, let the storm pass. But there are times when you have to put yourself on the front line, even knowing that the odds are not on your side. This dog shows us with his gesture that courageous decisions have the power to change destinies, to transform announced tragedies into stories of resistance. His gaze was fixed, unblinking, every muscle on alert. And although the bull was bigger, stronger, and more violent, the dog's steadfast presence seemed to shake the beast's certainty. It was a silent duel between instincts. On one side, irrational fury. On the other, love transformed into courage. The impact of this scene was not only in the imminence of the physical shock, but in the emotional revelation it carried. Because everyone there, even in a panic, began to realize that they were not alone. There was a protector willing to give his all, even against such a disproportionate enemy. And the most striking thing is that the dog's posture was not just reaction, it was decision. Behind the invisible scenes of that scene, there was a mentality that manifested itself in every bark, in every firm step. He was not big, he was not imposing, but his courage created a kind of invisible wall that prevented the bull from advancing. This is also true in life. It is not always physical strength that determines victory, but the intensity of what moves us. The family, still in shock, was beginning to feel something different. Fear was still present, but now mixed with a spark of hope. The revelation that they were not completely helpless brought a new perspective. It is curious how, in moments of despair, the courage of one can rekindle the flame in all others. This is the true impact of a decisive gesture. It not only protects physically, but transforms the mentality of those who attend. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because this scene brings out a truth that we often ignore. True strength lies not only in size, logic, or guarantees, but in the decision not to back down when all seems lost. This mindset is transformative, because it changes not only the immediate outcome, but also the way we look at life. The dog, by putting himself on the front line, teaches us that the greatest impact comes from the attitudes that no one expects, from the courage that appears without announcement behind the scenes of a critical moment. And that is why this story has the power to touch so deeply, because it reminds us that each of us carries within us the ability to act like this dog, to face invisible bulls that threaten our families, our dreams, our peace. It can be an unexpected crisis, a painful loss, a difficult decision. In these hours, the choice to put yourself on the front lines is what separates defeat from transformation. And you, imagining this dog rising up against the impossible, what do you feel? If this scene resonated with you, Comment there. I'm on this journey too. The bull stopped for an instant, as if calculating the next blow with the cold accuracy of one who trusts one's own size. The steam coming out of their nostrils made tiny veils dance in front of their snouts, while the earth beneath their hooves vibrated in a raw, almost hypnotic rhythm. The dog, by contrast, seemed sewn to the ground, ears strained, gaze red-hot, body tilted forward like a bow about to fire. There was something ancient about that scene, as if two primordial codes inscribed in nature forever were facing each other in silence to decide who would dictate the fate of that family. The father's breathing was short. The mother barely blinked, hugging the children so tightly that her fingers whitened. Time, undecided, now ran, now stretched, and every second brought the burning question inside. Would he have any chance against such a large and powerful animal? The first bark cut the air like a crack. It wasn't a sound of bravado, it was a decision-laden warning. The bull responded with a dry step, his head down, moving his neck as one who measures distances. The dog advanced 2 steps, retreated half a body, outlined a short curve and barked again, now graver, closer, forcing the giant to deflect for an instant the line of attack. The dust rose and drew golden halos in the midday light, and for a fleeting second, everyone had the feeling that the impossible could in fact gain space within the possible. The protective instinct did not ask logic for permission. It asked for loyalty, presence, a courage that did not consult statistics. The family watched in amazement at the duel of mentalities. On the one hand, brute force, the blind impulse that breaks fences. On the other, the precise decision of a guardian who understands that to protect is to put oneself between danger and one who loves oneself. The dog was not bigger, it was not stronger, but it carried in itself the hidden truth of borderline situations. When a heart decides that it will not retreat, size loses some of its power. He wasn't looking for heroes, he was making the gesture that needed to be made. In that yard, the word fate gained the smell of earth, the noise of hooves, a quickening pulse. The bull turned his body slightly and made the first serious breakthrough. The ground shook, the children caught the air, and the dog exploded to the side with a springy leap, cutting the animal's front at an acute angle and barking again, closer than would be prudent for any sensible creature. The goal was clear: to gain attention for themselves, to shift the axis of danger, to steal a second that was for the family to breathe. With each attack, the dog redrawn the map of that yard, as if drawing with its paws an invisible perimeter that the bull should not cross. There was calculation in instinct, a kind of ancestral choreography between escape and confrontation. The struggle of seconds seemed to turn into eternity. Dust clung to sweat. The highest leaves trembled from a wind that no one had noticed before, and everyone's mind there was torn between the desire to run and the need to stay. The father rehearsed a step, but retreated. He understood that if he broke the fragile balance, he could unleash the shock that everyone feared. The mother whispered something that even she herself could not hear, a mantra of protection that tried, in vain, to coordinate the heart. The dog continued its design, a purposeful zigzag, occupying spaces, dictating rhythms, calibrating distances. It is curious how, under pressure, reality reveals behind the scenes that we do not see on ordinary days. There, the transformation wasn't just in the dog's courage, it was in everyone's perception of what safety is, after all. We often believe that safety is the absence of risk. In that backyard, it was the presence of a compromise. No one passes me by. The impact of this was immediate. The panic that dominated began to give way to a clearer focus, a kind of thin light that pierces the fog. The father met the mother's gaze, and without saying a word, both understood. They needed to adjust their own mentality, exchange impulse for discernment, trust for a moment in the instinct of that guardian. The bull clapped its hooves again, dug a furrow, bowed its head and advanced longer with the violence of lightning. The dog received him sideways, biting into the void close to the skin, barking so close that the sound seemed to hit the metal. The big animal corrected the route, annoyed, and in this microcosm of decisions, another miracle was born. The dog did not run in a straight line. It kept the semicircle, forcing the beast to rotate the body, losing traction, losing time, losing part of the advantage. The intelligence of the movement replaced the missing strength. Courage was not blind, it was tactical, and yet the doubt persisted. Those who looked from the outside could say that luck decided. But there, What decided was the presence. Each bark was a brick added to an invisible wall. Each strategic retreat was a reminder that decisions, even small ones, can rewrite history. The family began to move millimeters. The father spread his arms to distract. The mother adjusted the body, repositioning the children behind herself, without provoking rupture. The yard became a board where each piece breathed, trembled, and chose. Now I want to go even deeper into this matter, because what was at stake was not only the collision between two animals, it was the revelation of a principle we often forget in difficult times. Courage is not a permanent state. It is a renewed act in the present. It is a decision that needs to be made again and again, especially when fear throbs in the temples. The mindset that springs from this understanding is more than bravery. It is responsibility. It is not about proving something to the world, but about honoring a bond. There is a huge difference between aggressiveness and protection. The former wants to win, the latter wants to preserve. When this thread becomes clear, the journey changes color. The dog no longer seemed small, it seemed necessary. His presence reorganized the sense of danger. The bull, which minutes before had been an indisputable monument of strength, now showed fissures. It lost its timing. It was irritated by the audacity. It reacted more than it acted. The guardian, in turn, remained faithful to the plan that instinct itself had drawn up. A simple plan, and at the same time full of revelations. Not to give a straight line, not to move away from the family, not to allow fear to do the service of the enemy. And the landscape absorbed everything. The mineral smell of the twisted earth, the roughness of the wood of the gate inside the palm of the father's hand, the weight of the bull's footsteps that came in waves across the ground. The children, still not understanding the complexity of it, felt something new, a mixture of terror and wonder, as if they were facing a hidden truth that only reveals itself when life turns the table. The mother, even trembling, straightened her shoulders. There was something in the posture of the dog that taught her to breathe fully, to be, to sustain the instant without breaking it. The bull took 2 steps back, almost imperceptibly, as if recalibrating the sight. The dog took advantage of the gap and occupied an extra half a meter, sticking his paws like someone who puts stakes. This is how courage builds territory, not with epic jumps, but with persistent centimeters. Each tiny win seemed to widen the margin of chance. And at the same time, the awareness remained that nothing was guaranteed. The compressed eternity of those seconds contained risk and hope in the same container. At this point, it is worth looking straight at the burning question: would he have a chance? Maybe the answer doesn't fit in percentages. Perhaps the chance exists exactly in the place where fear is still present, but does not decide. The dog did not conquer fear by eliminating it. He conquered fear by living with it and choosing to act in spite of it. That difference changes everything. The impact of this is not only measured by what happens in the backyard today, it is measured by the memory that will remain in each one from there forward, by the silent transformation that resizes what we call impossible. The bull makes the bow again, and the dog accompanies without surrendering the flank, without breaking the drawing. The eyes of the two meet in the middle of the dust, and there is a mute conversation between forces that respect each other for opposite reasons. The giant respects the audacity that does not retreat. The small respects the power that needs to be contained. Between one bark and another, between one hoof and another, life stacks decisions. There's no soundtrack, no official slow motion, but anyone who's been there swears they've heard history writing itself in dusty lyrics. If someone were to ask what changed in that instant, perhaps the answer would fit in one line. The family ceased to be just a hostage of fear and became a witness of its own courage. This does not eliminate the danger. It does not guarantee the end, but it exchanges paralysis for presence, distress for attention, giving up for the attempt. And oddly enough, when this happens, the outside world notices. The bull gets it. The energy of the place changes a degree, as when a storm decides to linger a little longer before falling. And this is where the scene finds its most tense point. The large animal carries the body to one side. The dog snaps a dry bark. The father holds the air in half. The mother straightens the children one step back. The mathematics of the instant accepts only living numbers, nerves, muscles, intentions. The bull again measures the distance, and the dog returns with the whole body the same message as always. Not this way. There is no cheating, there is no grandiose trick. There is discipline of instinct. It is discipline that makes courage last longer than an impulse. This learning, extracted at Mara, talks about choices we make when no one is looking. It speaks of loyalty, of commitment, of a simple ethics that does not need speeches to protect what is yours. And while the dust descends in small swirls, the scene remains in suspension, as if the backyard itself holds its breath to see what the next decision will be engraved on the ground. History, at this kind of crossroads, does not end. It deepens. What happened there has already changed something inside, and it is this change that makes room for the next step, whatever it may be. If this scene resonated with you and made sense in any way, write in the comments. I'm on this journey too. The next instant seemed to explode in every way at once. The bull, who had hitherto kept up a dance of threats, finally threw his body forward with the fury of thunder. The ground shook under the impact of the heavy paws. The dust rose like a dense cloud, and for a second all that was heard was the sound of the air being torn by the brutal advance. The dog, small before that colossus, reacted with the precision of those who had no choice but courage. He swerved at the last second, his nimble body skirting the animal's flank, and a low bark burst into the air like shrapnel. It was more than a sound. It was a cry that translated resistance, as if every fiber of it was saying that it would not be so simple to cross that yard. The bull, annoyed, turned his head in a sharp arc, trying to reach the dog with his horns. But the dog was swift, a flash of energy that defied the brutality of brute force. He advanced and retreated in calculated movements, and in one of these instants, he found the thick skin of the beast. A sharp, quick bite at the point where the front paw met the chest muscle. The giant animal snorted, surprised, and took a false step, opening a space that had not existed seconds before. The family watched everything incredulously, as if faced with a hidden truth. Strength was not only in size but in decision. The children pressed against their mother, unable to avert their eyes. The father, who was still holding his breath, seemed paralyzed at the revelation unfolding there. The dog was not just a companion. It was not just the everyday friend. He had transformed himself before the eyes of those who loved him into something greater, into a living wall. Each bark was a reminder that protection does not require guarantees of victory, but rather a firm decision not to give ground. The bull tried again. It charged sideways, scraping the floor, hot steam escaping from its nostrils in jets that mingled with the dust. But the dog once again was ready. He jumped to the opposite side, and when he touched the ground, he firmed his paws with impressive agility. The mouth closed for a moment on the animal's hind tendon, causing an immediate reaction. The bull bellowed, not in utter pain, but in surprise, as if he had just realized that this opponent, so small in comparison, was capable of hitting him at points he would never have expected. The intensity of the scene was overwhelming. The backyard, once the scene of quiet routines, was now an arena. The dust mingled with the metallic smell of sweat. The sound of hooves pounding against the earth set the tempo of tension, and each person's heart beat like an out-of-tune drum. The dog wouldn't back down. With each lunge, he would find a way to dodge, bark, or bite at strategic points. It was as if his mind worked in another rhythm, as if it had found a way to turn seconds into eternity. This is the real impact of extreme situations. They expose not only the danger, but also the essence of who we are in front of it. While the bull advanced in repeated waves of violence, the dog became a moving fortress, a living reflection of the protective instinct. And this revelation carries an enormous weight, because it shows us that in moments of crisis, transformation happens in front of everyone, without the need for words, only with actions that speak louder than any speech. The father, in silence, began to realize that this fight was not only physical. There was a mindset there, an invisible lesson about courage. The mother, still protecting her children, felt something change inside. The fear still existed, but along with it there was also a spark of hope. The emotional impact was so strong that every look, every restrained tear, every interrupted sigh carried a deep meaning. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic because this scene is not just about a dog facing a bull. It's about revealing what we are capable of when life puts us in front of the impossible. How often do we feel small in the face of huge problems? How often do we believe that we have no chance, that defeat is inevitable? But just like this dog, we have the ability to act strategically, to find loopholes, to resist even when the world insists on pushing us back. This unequal struggle shows that courage does not eliminate fear, but reorganizes it. It shows that quick decisions, even the simplest ones, have the power to change the course of a story. The dog was not beating the bull by force, but by clarity of purpose. And that clarity is transformative because it redefines the impossible. It is a hidden truth that is revealed only in the direct clash with adversity, that love and loyalty can create invisible forces that go beyond logical calculation. The suspense continued. The bull, more and more angry, made new advances, but in each of them he met resistance. The dog tirelessly barked and bit at the right points as if he was born for that moment. It was an intense scene, capable of recording itself forever in the memory of those who witnessed it. The impossible at that moment did not seem so far away, and you, accompanying this confrontation by imagination, can you feel the strength that exists in putting yourself on the front line, even when everything says that it is impossible? He says, "That makes sense to me." The bull, seized with fury, did not give up. Each advance was more violent than the last. Each onslaught was accompanied by the deafening sound of hooves banging against the earth, kicking up dust and leaving deep marks on the floor of the yard. The animal looked like a force of nature in its raw state, an incarnate storm that did not tire. And the most impressive thing was to see the dog, much smaller in size, maintain its position without retreating. His barking echoed steadily, and with each quick jump to the side or strategic bite, he tore from the bull not only a movement of anger, but also precious seconds. And in that instant, every second was an eternity that could mean the difference between life and tragedy. The family, paralyzed by the scene, began to understand that this fight was not just about instinct, but about sacrifice. The dog wasn't just defending a physical space, it was securing time, and time is the most valuable currency in extreme situations. While the bull focused on him, the family had a chance to move slowly, adjusting the steps carefully, as if they did not want to break the fragile balance that the dog had built. The father, with restrained gestures, indicated to the mother to lead the children towards the door of the house. Their hearts were beating so loudly that they seemed to echo, but they were still moving. The impact of that instant was so profound that everyone felt as if the scene was etching invisible marks into their souls. Outside, the dog continued the duel. The bull advanced with short lunges, trying to corner him, but the dog swerved in fast turns, always keeping between the enemy and the family. What impressed was not just the physical agility, but the clarity of purpose. He did not run without direction. He did not allow himself to be carried away only by fury. There was order in his movements, almost like a strategy that was born behind the scenes of instinct. It barked, retreated, attacked at sensitive points, bit where it knew it could annoy the most, and this was enough to destabilize the giant. The children, already near the door, looked over their shoulders, without believing what they saw. The father, even trying to remain calm, felt a mixture of pride and pain in his chest, because he understood what was at stake. The mother, with trembling hands, pulled the little ones inside, at the same time crying in silence, torn between the need to save her children and the anguish of leaving behind that faithful friend who was giving his all. The hidden truth of this moment is that courage never comes without cost, and there the cost was drawing before everyone's eyes. The bull snorted, already tired of being challenged. His nostrils inflated and released jets of hot air, his eyes flashed red with fury. Still, he seemed increasingly confused by the resistance he encountered. He was used to seeing enemies retreat before his force, but that little dog wouldn't back down. On the contrary, he advanced with more and more determination, as if he carried in himself an invisible force that made him greater than he really was. That is the most striking revelation. True greatness is not in the body, but in the mindset. And in that fight, the dog's mentality overcame any physical limit. Meanwhile, the family finally managed to cross the threshold of the house. The children entered first, followed by their mother, who nearly tripped as she closed the door behind her. The father, still looking back, took an extra second, as if he wanted to record every detail of the scene. He knew that moment would never leave his memory. The dog was out there, still facing the impossible, giving the family what none of them could ever fully repay: the gift of survival. The tension was reaching its limit. The backyard was no longer the same quiet space as before. It had become a battlefield. The dust suspended in the air seemed to create a haze that made everything even more surreal. The bull was advancing again, this time in a short, furious run, but the dog leaped sideways at just the right moment, snapping lightly at the flank skin, and then swerving away. It was not a bite to win. It was to distract, to delay, to steal moments of life. The impact of this gesture was devastating in its simplicity. It was not about knocking down the enemy, but about preventing him from reaching those who were in danger. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, because what this scene shows us is not just about strength or courage. It's about the silent transformation that occurs when someone chooses to put themselves on the front lines to protect others. How many times in our own journey have we faced situations where we need to buy time to think, to save someone, to breathe in the chaos? The dog teaches us that often victory is not in defeating the enemy, but in resisting enough so that others can follow. This is a powerful revelation because it redefines what we call triumph. The moment was one of pure tension. Inside the house, the family cried and prayed, while outside, the duel continued. And it is impossible not to feel the grandeur of this scene. A small animal, guided only by love and loyalty, challenging a giant. The impossible became real in front of all who witnessed. And that's why this story has such an impact, because it reveals that true heroism often happens behind the scenes of life, away from the spotlight, when someone decides, without fanfare, to face the unimaginable. And when you imagine this moment of pure surrender and sacrifice, what do you feel? Write in the comments, I'm on this journey too. The backyard didn't look the same anymore. The ground was scratched by deep grooves left by the bull's hooves, and the suspended dust still swirled in the air, as if carrying in itself the memory of each onslaught. The bull snorted, exhausted, his dilated nostrils spitting steam, his eyes still sparkling, but no longer with the same initial conviction. For a moment, it seemed that he would still try another attack, but the heavy body no longer responded with the same violence. On the other side, the dog, dirty with dirt, its fur disheveled and with small cuts that denounced the harshness of the confrontation, remained standing firm like a sentry who did not dare to give in an inch. His eyes did not tremble. Even wounded, the protective instinct still made him vibrate, as if the battle was not over until the threat was completely gone. The bull took a few steps back, dragging its hooves unevenly. He snorted again, but now it sounded more like a sigh of defeat than a promise of violence. The dog growled low, following every movement, without relaxing for a single second. There was a charged silence in the air, as if nature itself had stopped to watch the denouement. Then what no one expected happened. The bull retreated. He turned his body slowly, snorted once more, as if admitting defeat, and wearily walked away until he disappeared down the same path he had come. It was as if the storm had suddenly dissipated, leaving behind only the mark of its passage. Inside the house, the family took a few seconds to believe what they were seeing. The father was the first to open the door with a restrained impetus, as if he still feared that everything was nothing more than an illusion. The mother held her children, both wide-eyed and wet with tears, unable to process the grandeur of the scene that had just happened. The dog, even reeling slightly from his wounds, kept his posture upright, staring fixedly at where the bull had disappeared, as if still ready for another round, if necessary. It was an image of absolute impact, an exhausted but victorious guardian who had faced the impossible and resisted. The children ran first, crossing the yard still full of dust to hug their companion. The mother followed soon after, tears streaming down her face, sobbing with relief and gratitude. The father finally came to him, kneeling down to examine the wounds. The dog gasped, tired, but his gaze was still determined, as if to say that he would do it all over again if he had to. This is the hidden truth of the bonds we create with these animals. They do not measure efforts. They do not make calculations about risks and rewards. They act out of something pure, simple, and powerful, unconditional love. The contrast between the brutality of the scene and the tenderness of that reunion was so strong that it seemed impossible not to be moved. The family enveloped him in caresses, in words spoken between sobs, in silent promises of care. There was no victory celebrated as in a spectacle. There was a deep, almost sacred gratitude. The dog did not need medals or applause. His reward was to see those he loved safely. And this revelation is one of the most powerful. Greatness often lies not on illuminated stages, but behind the scenes of life, where silent decisions transform destinies. The father, with trembling hands, checked the wounds, trying to stop small bleeding with pieces of his own shirt. The children stroked the animal's fur, repeating its name as if that sound were an anchor capable of holding it steady. The mother, kneeling beside her, wept without shame, wept with relief, wept with admiration, wept because she understood that if it were not for that faithful friend, they might not be there to weep. The emotional impact was so intense that even in the face of victory there was also a silent pain, the awareness that that animal had exposed itself to the limit, all for love. It is at this point that the scene ceases to be just a narrative of confrontation and becomes a life lesson. How often do we feel tired, hurt, about to give up, and yet find the strength to protect what matters most? The dog, even injured, remained on his feet until the last moment, because he understood that his journey was not yet completed. That mindset is transformative. It teaches us that victory is not the absence of wounds, but the choice to remain, to resist, to rise even when everything pushes us down. Now I want to go even deeper into this matter, because what this unbelievable result reveals is much greater than a confrontation between a dog and a bull. It shows us that in our own lives, we also face battles that seem disproportionate. How many times do we retreat in the face of problems that seem gigantic to us, believing that we have no chance? And yet, if we look within, perhaps we will find that same flame, that same courage that makes us move forward, even wounded, even tired, because there is something or someone worth protecting. The transformation that happens in this type of experience is not limited to the moment. The family from then on would never see that dog in the same way. He would not only be the playmate, but the hero who gave them the chance to continue living. And the dog, no matter how much he did not seek recognition, would forever bear the mark of what he had done, the mark of courage, of surrender, of victory against the impossible. And you, imagining this unbelievable result, what do you feel inside yourself? He said, "That makes sense to me." The next day, the small rural community was already overwhelmed by murmurs that ran faster than any wind. The story of that dog who had single-handedly faced an enraged bull to save his family had spread from house to house, from mouth to mouth, charged with amazement and admiration. Every neighbor who approached the farm had the same look of disbelief and respect in his eyes, as if it were hard to believe that all this had really happened. Still, the ground marked by the onslaught of the bull and the wounds visible on the dog's body were living proof of what no one dared to doubt. It was impossible not to feel a shiver when passing through the gate and seeing that yard transformed into the scene of a feat that bordered on the unbelievable. The gate of the property became a meeting point. Neighbors arrived bringing groceries, fruits, bread, small gestures that symbolized gratitude and solidarity. Some came just to see with their own eyes the animal that had done something so improbable. Others came in silence, just watched, got emotional, and left a piece of affection there before returning home. The dog, even tired and still with marks of the fight, received each one with that firm look that transmitted serenity. No longer just the friend of the family, he was now seen as the guardian of the community, a symbol of courage that uplifted everyone. And this shows us a hidden truth. When someone stands up against the impossible, the impact goes beyond the limits of their own world, also transforming the way others see what is possible. The local press was not long in coming. Journalists arrived with cameras, microphones, notebooks. They wanted to record every detail, to hear the account of the father, the mother, even the children who, even still frightened, told with enthusiasm and tears in their eyes how the dog had faced the bull without hesitation. The older reporter, accustomed to covering tragedies and hard news, was emotional during the interview, admitting that he had rarely witnessed a story so charged with human meaning. It was as if, for a brief moment, that backyard had become the scene of a universal revelation about love, loyalty, and courage. The whole community began to look at the dog as a real hero. The children of the village asked to meet him. The elders told the story as if it were a Moderna legend. And even people who had never visited that farm moved to see closely the animal that, alone, had faced the brutality of brute force. The impact was collective. It was not just a family saved, it was an entire region that felt inspired and protected by that gesture. The dog had no notion of the extent of his action, but his presence now carried a different, almost sacred aura. It was striking to note how even the common spaces, such as the corner sale or the little square in front of the church, became places of debate about what had happened. Residents talked about the scene in detail, as if each had been present. Some compared the dog's courage to that of great warriors. Others said that they would never be able to look at an animal in the same way again. There was a collective awakening there, the feeling that life can reveal greatness hidden behind the simplest scenes of existence. The father of the family, his voice still choked by the memory of the confrontation, said over and over again that he could never thank them enough. The mother, when asked by the press, stated that her greatest learning was discovering that love can take forms that go beyond any limit. The children, hugging the dog, repeated his name as if it were a mantra, and every time he wagged his tail, even in pain, it was as if hope gained new life in everyone's heart. It was a silent spectacle of transformation in which pain turned to wonder and fear to trust. This collective reaction showed something fascinating. It was not just about applauding an act of bravery, but about resignifying the very notion of heroism. After all, what defines a hero? Is it the force? Is it victory? Or is it the decision, even without guarantees, to put yourself between danger and who needs protection? The community, looking at that dog, seemed to find that answer. And it echoed in every look, in every word, in every tear shared. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because this reaction of the community reveals something essential. When a gesture of courage happens, it not only transforms those directly involved, but also all those who have contact with the story. It's like a wave that spreads in ever-widening circles, carrying inspiration, sparking reflection, stirring up old beliefs, and showing that life can be more than the monotonous routine suggests. This journey shows us that great deeds are not always born from distant places or from grandiose people. They often sprout in the backyard of a simple house, from a being who acts without thinking about glory, only about protecting. And this invites us to think about our own lives. How many times have we stopped acting because we believe that no one will notice or value it? This story reminds us that every act of courage, no matter how small, has an impact. Sometimes it saves a life, sometimes it inspires an entire community. And this is the most powerful truth that this dog delivers to us. Courage does not need a stage. It creates its own space and leaves marks that never fade. And you, imagining this collective reaction, this recognition that is born spontaneously, what do you feel? Write in the comments. This makes sense to me. That scene was not restricted to the physical confrontation between a dog and a bull. What remained, even after the gates were closed, the dust had settled and the neighbors had returned to their homes, was something much deeper. Because deep down, that story was not just about an animal facing a giant, but about the essence of what courage is. And courage, contrary to what many think, is not the absence of fear. On the contrary, it is to feel fear, it is to know the risk, it is to understand the fragility of one's own existence, and yet to choose to move forward, to choose to put oneself in front, to choose to protect the one we love, even though all the probabilities say that there is no chance of victory. The dog did not have rational calculations, did not have survival statistics, did not make elaborate plans before jumping in front of the bull. He acted on instinct, but that instinct was imbued with something humans often forget: loyalty. A loyalty so deep that it does not seek recognition, does not demand rewards, does not depend on applause. It is a pure, sincere, and unconditional surrender. And when we think about it, we can't help but compare it to our own decisions. How often do we fail to act, to protect, to fight, because we stop too long to calculate risks? How many times do we give in to doubt, while life asks precisely for this immediate clarity from those who simply choose to love above themselves? This reflection is not about romanticizing blind sacrifice, but about understanding the impact that a true attitude can generate. The dog, by facing the bull, not only saved his family, but left an eternal testimony about what it means to live the essence of loyalty. He showed behind the scenes of the fight a hidden truth. There are times when physical strength is not the decisive factor, but the strength of the decision. The decision not to retreat, not to abandon, not to let fear dictate fate. And this teaching echoes not only for those who saw the scene, but for anyone who allows himself to reflect on it. That is why that message echoed among all. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to face even when the heart pulses with uncertainty. And this decision often does not need words. It manifests itself in gestures, in looks, in silent acts that, when revealed, transform forever the mentality of those who witness them. By observing the dog's posture in the face of danger, it is impossible not to see how much our own journey is shaped by similar choices. We don't always face raging bulls in backyards, but daily we come across forces that seem bigger than us, problems that crush, situations that test our limits, pains that challenge our endurance. And it is in those moments when life seems to push us against the wall that the opportunity arises to reveal who we really are. It is not fear that defines us, but the way we react to it. This episode also leads us to reflect on the power of loyalty. For many, loyalty may seem like a simple word, even worn out by usage. But when we look at it in this context, we realize that this is something revolutionary. The dog's loyalty wasn't just emotional, it was a practical decision, turned into action. He could have fled, gone into hiding, sought safety, but he chose to put himself between danger and those he loved. This choice teaches us that true loyalty is not measured in words spoken in moments of calm, but in attitudes taken in the midst of chaos. And see how deeply this lesson touches the human heart, because all of us, on some level, are looking for someone or something to show us that we are not alone, that we have protection, that there is an indestructible link that sustains us. The dog, in that impossible struggle, became the personification of that link. He showed us that even when all seems lost, there can still be a force that stands up, not because it knows it will win, but because it simply won't back down. This hidden truth forces us to think about our own lives and relationships. How loyal are we to those we love? To what extent do we stand firm when the storm approaches? To what extent do we allow fear to be greater than our courage? The impact of this reflection is profound because it shows us that often the true hero is not the one who wins all the battles, but the one who refuses to leave the trench even when all seems lost. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic, because this scene is not only a metaphor for bravery, but also a mirror of our own mentality in the face of difficulties. Life, on its journey, will always put obstacles in our way. Some as immense as a raging bull, others silent but equally challenging. And in these backstage of existence, it is up to each of us to decide whether we're going to be paralyzed spectators or protagonists who dare to face. The dog teaches us that one does not have to be big, strong, or prepared to transform a destiny. What is required is clarity, decisiveness, and delivery. He had no guarantees, but he had purpose. And maybe that's exactly what is missing so often in our lives. Purpose. A motive that is greater than ourselves, something that makes us get up even when we are tired, that drives us to act even when we have no strength. Because when there is purpose, fear loses some of its power. This reflection does not diminish his sacrifice. On the contrary, it magnifies it. It shows us that in every gesture of courage, there is a lesson capable of crossing borders, of echoing in different realities, of inspiring people to re-evaluate their own choices. That dog's courage no longer belonged only to his family or his community. It was a symbolic patrimony, a revelation about the capacity we all have to stand up, to resist, to love unconditionally. And in the end, as we look at this story with an open heart, we cannot escape this question. What is the bull we are facing today? What is the fear that paralyzes us? And more importantly, what is the reason that makes us stay on our feet even when the chances seem non-existent? This is the journey that this story invites us to take, a journey of transformation in which we discover that courage, when it is born of love, is capable of defying any obstacle. And as you feel the power of this reflection, can you see how it also connects with your own life? Then he says, I'm on this journey too. This story proves in a way that is almost impossible to ignore that heroes can have 4 legs and a giant heart. When we think of the word hero, the mind almost automatically leads us to grandiose figures, to characters who occupy magazine covers, or to warriors who have fought historical battles. But in that simple dirt yard, far from the spotlight, the true meaning of this term was revealed. A dog with nothing but his courage and his loyalty showed that heroism is not born from the desire to be recognized, but from the willingness to give himself entirely to protect the one he loves. And this is a revelation that needs to be carried forward, because it speaks directly to the essence of who we are as human beings, beings in search of connection, of security, of meaning. What is most impressive is to realize that the impact of such a pure gesture is not limited to the instant in which it happens. It spreads, reverberates, crosses invisible borders, and reaches places we could never imagine. This dog has not only entered the history of his family or his community, but into the history of humanity itself, which recognizes in loyalty and love a force capable of defying logic. And it is precisely in this silent force that we find the inspiration to review our own choices, to rethink our decisions, to reflect on what really matters in our journeys. It is impossible to look at this narrative without feeling the inner transformation it provokes, because witnessing the unequal struggle between a dog and a bull, we realize that the most important battles are not won with strength, but with purpose. The hidden truth that is revealed is that often the power of decision is greater than any physical obstacle. The dog had no size, no advantages, no guarantees, but he had one unshakable conviction: to protect his family. And when a decision is born of this intensity, there is no statistic capable of containing the impact it generates. This message invites us to reflect on our own behind the scenes. How often do we face problems that seem bigger than we are? How many times do we believe we have no chance in the face of a difficulty? And yet, as we look at this history, we realize that the true measure of our strength lies not in what we have, but in what we are willing to face. The dog teaches us that in many moments of life, to be a hero is not to win the impossible, but not to abandon the fight. And this is the point that connects emotion and learning. Courage, when sustained by loyalty, transforms not only the immediate fate, but the entire plot that comes after. That animal, wounded but standing, victorious, represented not only the victory against a bull, but the victory of essence over brutality, of love over fear, of decision over doubt. This is the mindset we need to carry in our own walk, the certainty that when we choose to protect, when we choose to love, when we choose not to back down, we are writing pages that can inspire far beyond our reach. Now I want to go even deeper into this matter, because the emotion we feel when listening to this story is also a reflection of something that is dormant within each of us. It is as if this account shines a light through the darkness of our uncertainties, reminding us that we all carry within us the possibility of being guardians. Guardians of the people we love, guardians of our principles, guardians of what we believe to be just and true. This journey is not made of big stages or applause, but of silent decisions that, added together, build who we really are. And when we understand this, the impact is devastating, in the best sense of the word, because we realize that we do not have to wait for ideal conditions to act. We do not need to be prepared in every way. We do not need to have absolute control over what is to come. It is enough to be clear about what is important and have the courage to stand up for it. The dog did not wait for someone to lead him, did not wait for orders, did not analyze probabilities. He simply moved. And that movement, however simple, carried the intensity of a decision that changed everything. That's the kind of transformation stories like this provoke. They force us to look in the mirror and ask ourselves what we've done with the opportunities life gives us to act courageously. Are we hiding behind fear? Have we shrunk from the first difficulty? Or are we willing to embrace the journey, even when it seems impossible, even when everything tells us to give up? The answer lies not in ready-made formulas, but in the awareness that every act of loyalty, every gesture of courage, is a seed planted in the land of life, ready to blossom into inspiration for others. This story proves that heroes can have 4 legs and a giant heart. But more than that, it proves that the definition of hero is not limited to appearances or labels. Heroes are those who decide not to retreat, who stand up when everyone expects escape, who stand firm when the world falls apart. And if this is possible in a dog, guided only by instinct and love, why would it not be possible in us, beings capable of consciously choosing courage? This is where the journey connects with you. Because by listening to this narrative, you're not just getting to know a story, you're being called to reflect on your own, about the battles he faces, about the fears he carries, about the people he loves and would protect without thinking twice. And perhaps that's exactly what gives this account so much power. It shows us bluntly that we can all be guardians. So if this message has touched you in any way, if it has awakened in you this awareness that courage can change destinies and that loyalty is one of the most transformative forces in life, I want you to leave it registered in the comments. He writes, "That makes sense to me. After all this, I know that this story moved you in some way because there is no way to go through something like this without feeling it. And if what you found here made sense, if it gave you value and opened a space for reflection, it makes perfect sense for you to subscribe to the channel, so we continue together on this journey, always bringing content that touches the ground and leaves a mark. Also enjoy and leave your like because it is the simplest way to show that this connection we created today was worth it. And since you stayed with me until here, I want to propose you something special. Write there in the comments the phrase, "I'm with you until the end," so I will know who really walked with me until the last second of this story. Now, you don't have to stop here. There is a video here on the side that complements this subject and will further expand this reflection. Click and stick with me there because our conversation is just getting started.